Okay, awesome. So glad to visit with you today that we got that. Thanks guys for working that out. There's a little bit of technological challenge, but isn't it amazing that we can connect? I know, because I know some of the people who came on the call personally. I know we're literally coast to coast right now, and that's just amazing. That's so cool. So I'm so pleased to kick off this program for you, and this is how this is going to work. The NIA office in Houston is going to watch the chat while I'm presenting so that I don't try to keep up with where I am and watch the chat at the same time. So I'm going to have a couple places where I have you do an exercise, and you're going to take notes for yourself as well as put an answer in the chat box. And then at the end, I'm not going to go a full hour. I'm shorter than that. At the end, we'll have a Q&A time, and we'll pull out the answers from chat or figure out how to navigate actually potentially totally live questions. So we'll see how much time we have left at the end, but we should have plenty. So NIA asked if I would talk about something with sales, and I was thinking about how important it is for us to think about the mindset that we want to have right now in this trying time. I have just a little bit about me. I'm going to quickly be talking about you, but just so those of you that don't know me, I'll give you a little bit of context about my life. This is a smorgasbord of my life. I have worked remotely for 17 years, and when I'm not traveling and speaking in person, I do work from home. And so I feel like I feel very lucky because I have a bit of an advantage in that I'm not having to get adjusted with the home office and figure out how to manage myself in these times. But I am pretty extroverted, and I love my people, I love my family, but this is hard, and this is going to get harder because it's going to go on a while before it gets over. But and I recognize that, and I recognize that everyone is in a period of adjustment. Scott mentioned that I have a background in sales. I've always done something in sales, and industry-wise, early in my career, I worked in retail and restaurants. And then after college, I became a recruiter. So I did a tremendous amount of phone work. Now, this was in the mid-90s. And, people were shipping laptops to employees, and you would plug in your landline from the phone. So it was not nearly as high tech as that job would be now, but I did lots and lots and lots of phone work, both from the office and from home. I then sold consulting services for 2 different technology firms. And when I began my first sales business in the early 2000s, my job was to generate sales leads for other companies. So think of it like a staffing agency. Now, I mentioned this to you guys because I have personally called into most major industries in my professional career. And the unique perspective that gave me that I hope will be informing what I bring to you on the call today is that I probably sold something for someone or tried to get a sales call with someone like you at some point in the past, because I did a lot of cold calling, a lot of marketing email, a lot of sales work over the years. And so I feel like the combination of that telemarketing work as well as the different industries I worked in kind of gives me a unique perspective to talk about what it's like to sell across different industries in this time right now. Now, just a couple points of interest here. You're seeing bottom right here, you see my beautiful boxer, who I was never a dog person, and it's our big family joke that she is my dog and that she thinks that I make the sun come up in the morning and go down at night, and we're connected at the hip, so that's really great. My boys, my wonderful husband, and it's noteworthy to mention that my husband Ryan is a psychology researcher, and his career has changed my life in sales. And some of the things that I'm going to share with you today are demonstrating how I've built these psychology principles into the way I think about serving other people. And I hope I can share that with you in a way that helps you think about getting through this time in the best way possible and thriving in the best way possible because of some of that psychology. So this is the title that the advertisement said. right? Your mindset in selling. And then as I really started preparing, I thought, well, this is really what I'm going to talk about. Okay, so I hope you won't feel like it's a bait and switch. I hope you'll see how they're the same thing, but this is not a sexy title, right? How the way we look at situations affects what happens next. that wouldn't make it as a daily dose title. But that is actually where I want to suggest that we spend a little bit of time looking today, because we do have a choice right now when we're thinking about the fundraising we need to do, the products we want to sell, the services we want to sell, whether to sell, what's appropriate and what's not appropriate right now. The way we look at what's happening around us and the way we interact with other people and what we choose to believe about those situations will influence what happens for us personally and professionally next. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that. One of the key lessons that I'd like you to get from today, if you write down only a handful of things from the lesson, okay? One of the things I want you to take from today is that people are what I call meaning makers. People are meaning makers. We cannot have thoughts in our own head, interact with other people, whether they're sales prospects, they're our partner, our spouse, our children, our friends. We're always interpreting what is happening around us. And to illustrate that point, let me give you an example. If you're a human, you've had an argument with a friend, right? You have some kind of disagreement with a friend before. She tells the story of what happened one way. You were in the exact same experience. You tell the story of what happened a different way, and you both think you're right, right? It's because everything is subject to your own personal interpretation. And you and I, we decide 100 times a day. That's an estimate. That's not a scientific number, okay? It's an estimate. But we decide lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of times a day what someone else's statement, what their email, what their comment, what they did or didn't say or do. We decide what that means because we're meaning makers. We just can't help it, okay? Now, the problem with this is that we're not always right about the way we have given meaning to a certain situation. In fact, we're often not right. And that is the two-sided coin, the two-sided coin. The great thing is we're people, we are evolved, we can make meaning, we can see beauty, we have all these things that actually are superior to animals. The other side is we're making meaning and we're not doing it accurately a lot of the times. And that is, well, we don't have time for a philosophy and theology training right now, but there's lots of reasons that's the case. And I think you know, back to the argument with a friend, you can't both be right all the time. Someone is more right, someone is less right, or sometimes no one's right, right? It's always a subjective thing. Okay, so why does this matter in sales? Let me give you 3 ways to think about this and why I believe that this lesson is useful for this moment in time in our world, really. There are 3 categories of how we interpret what is around us. First is how we think about global and national systems. Okay, that thinking is summarized in statements like when we say or hear someone say, well, that's just how things are, or that's just how the world works. So these are global beliefs that illustrate what when you say them or you hear someone else say them, it illustrates just what you think is true and the meaning that you've given certain things. So some of you on this call are actually personal friends of mine, and you know a lot about my family in particular. And I'll tell you just a very brief story. My youngest son wants to be a professional performer. In fact, his dream is to be on Broadway. Now, for his father, who is a statistician, and his mother, who is an entrepreneur, but I can sell, so I really could go sell for anyone, sell anything, and I would be just fine. Having my son want to go be a professional artist and be one of the very few that ever makes it, that makes any real money on Broadway, has been a scary proposition for us. So if I say something to you like, my youngest son wants to go on Broadway, and no one who ever becomes a professional artist can really make any money. What is that saying in my statement about what I think about the world and the meaning that I'm giving to that dream that he has? That's subject to my interpretation, right? So I tell you that kind of tongue in cheek because I'm working on my belief that my son can and will have a beautiful, prosperous life as a performer, and that I don't want to be right about my fears and worries about that. But if I make big blanket statements about what is or isn't possible, that's an example of world and worldview, right? That's me saying, this is what I think about what always happens in these certain situations, okay? The second area where we create meaning is people to people. So people situations. And this is where we also are going to talk about how this affects us in selling, because we typically sell people to people, whether that's online or in person. There's all different ways that could happen, business to business, business to consumer. Think of the second category as people to people. And the third, finally, is that we tell ourselves in our inner voice inside our head things all day long, and I call that self-talk. Okay, and the self-talk is what we do as individual humans. Now, my dog is amazing and brilliant, but I don't think that she has the kind of self-talk I have running through mine, okay? With self-talk, we make meaning all the time, but it's in our heads, okay? So let me show you some examples of what that might look like. First, let's talk about sales and worldview. When people make huge blanket statements about how things, quote, just are, or how things work, that is them making a statement about their worldview, how they think the world works. We all do this, and there's many, many differing opinions, right? So it could be everything from war is never justified to all politicians are selfish. You know, those ideas are up for debate in a different discussion, right? But right now, you all are thinking of these kinds of questions a lot, because right now we have a worldwide virus, right? We have crazy things happening that are really unprecedented in my lifetime. Okay, they have happened before, but not in my lifetime. So let's bring this principle down to something very practical that you're thinking about related to your business. How does what we think about selling and about sales in general affect us as well as our potential customers? Okay, so this is where I want you to do your first little exercise that I have for you, okay? Please get out a notebook or a piece of paper, and in just a minute, I'm gonna give you about 15 seconds, and I want you to write down the first 3 words that come to mind when you see some words that come on the screen, okay? So go ahead and get something to write on, or get that ready in your computer, and I'm gonna have my timer here, so I really watch our time, and I'm going to show you these words. Now, I want you to write down the first 3 words, and they can be nouns, adjectives, or phrases. What do you think that comes to your mind when you see the word sales or salesman? I'm looking for at least 3 words. You can also put them in the chat if you'd like. I'd love to see that later. I'm not gonna respond to that right now, but I'd like to come back to that. And you can also write it in your notebook. Nouns or adjectives or phrases, first 3 words. Okay, so now take a minute and look at the words that you wrote, and I want you to just put a little plus mark or a little minus mark. I want you to notice if the words or phrases or sentence fragments that you wrote, I want you to notice if they're positive in nature or if they're negative in nature, okay? Now, while you're doing that, let me share with you that I've been running a version of this experiment for a couple of years now. I actually, a lot of times in-person live training, I actually will really gather people's surveys for this, and I've done that over enough times now that I actually have a statistically significant survey sample. And it's very important for you to hear me say that when I am surveying people, like I don't know everybody in the profession of everybody on this call, but when I am training in live workshops, I always know who the people are that are in the groups, because usually they're groups of 100 people or more, and I know who invited me, you know, to speak at the event. And so they are usually business owners, or they are the sales/business development professionals that work for the business owner. And the business owners are usually the people who are responsible for the sales themselves. Okay, so when asked about the first few words that come to mind, the very same people who do selling for their own company, this is how they answer. Now, you guys know how a word cloud works, right? You know that this is put together by software. You can use something like Menti or there's different software that will gather this for you. And the biggest words are the words that are repeated the most often. So the biggest words are listed more than all the rest. And so when it comes to speaking in general terms, okay, think back to our slide that's about world and worldview. When it comes to speaking in general terms about how people think about selling, we can say that at the worldview level, many, many people who attend my workshops think that selling is dishonorable and disgusting. The words are a little bit smaller, so I want to draw your attention to under pushy there in gray, there's a small word in gray that I don't know how well you can see, but it says sharks. And right next to it in maroon, it says wolves. So what that's telling you is that in a 20-second exercise, more than one person said that, because I have done this survey many times. So not only do a lot of people at the worldview level think that selling, even in normal circumstances, you guys, I don't even mean right now, I mean not under duress, I ask people these questions. People think it's dishonorable, they think people don't listen, they don't make eye contact, they're people to be avoided at all costs. And I think it's so fascinating and sad, really, but interesting, that there are even predatory ideas like sharks and wolves, okay? Now, this is really common, you guys. I mean, that's what I want you to get from it, is I don't say this to make people feel bad. And when I go look at the chat, maybe some of you are in the minority and you actually do have positive thoughts that come to mind, and be so grateful if that's true. When I was in 7th grade, I began my journey that is affectionately known in my immediate family as my band geek journey. Okay, so I was a percussionist, I was a drummer, and I joined the middle school band the first opportunity I could, and I was in the back, you know, clanging the cymbals and playing the snare drum, okay? And my music career as being a band geek went all the way through junior high, high school, all the way, actually studied music in college, so all the way through college. And every year in middle school and high school, in my school district, I grew up in San Antonio, Texas, and in my school district, we had a fundraiser. And the fundraiser was always at Halloween, and we would sell candy. And everyone would get these, they were actually Heath bars. I couldn't find a good image of the Heath bars, but they were these little mini Heath bars, and which I think is funny because not everyone even likes toffee, but that's what we sold. And we would get these bags and bags and bags of candy. And the idea was that we would sell them at a marked up rate, you know, through this fundraising company. And we were supposed to be raising money for band camp. That was the goal of what we were supposed to do. So every year my family would go through the ritual where I would bring the bags home, and my mother would say, not just no, she would say, HE double hockey sticks, no. You are not going to go ask the neighbors. I am certainly not going to be like the women in my office who bring their kids fundraisers, sign-up sheets to work, and I feel like I have to fill them out. And you are most definitely not going to bring this to the family get-together, because we are not going to ask anyone to buy these. right? She really felt she was doing me a service and the people around her a service by saying, we're not going to bother our neighbors, don't go ask them. But I want to bring to your attention that it never occurred to her that maybe someone else would interpret or could make this opportunity or situation mean something else. To her, selling candy and asking people to pay for it was tantamount to begging, right? It was dishonorable, it was annoying, it was frustrating. I specifically remember her saying the hospital where she was a nurse, she didn't like when people brought their kids' Boy Scout popcorn tins to sell or Girl Scout cookies or things like that. So do you see how she didn't even have room, excuse me, for the possibility that someone else might make a different meaning out of this? What if our neighbors liked buying Heath bars? What if our neighbors liked that I was a band geek? What if they thought it was cute that I wanted to sell candy? What if they wanted to support my musical aspirations, which I actually was very serious about? I'm kind of kidding, but I went on to study music in college. I was really very serious about it. But see, because to her, sales meant something dirty and icky, and it meant bothering people, she just didn't have room to interpret the situation differently. She wasn't trying to do a disservice to me, and it's the irony of all ironies that I would end up enjoying sales so much, right? Because this really happened every year with my band candy. So if I'd ask you, if the way you think of selling deep down, what you really think when you think no one is listening to you, is that belief affecting your ability to be creative about how you sell or what you offer to people right now, possibly even this week? Chances are high that that's so. Okay, just based on my experience, chances are high that that's so. Now, remember our second category is people to people, that we make meaning in situations that are people to people. Okay, these are things like our conversations, texts, glances, jokes, comments, people responding or not responding to certain situations. Think about those unresponded to emails, right, or unreturned phone calls. Every day, all day long, we decide what other people's responses or lack of responses mean. We decide what they mean. Now, this is a really, really big deal to your sales success, that you recognize that you give meaning to whether people get back to you or not when you're speaking with customers or potential customers. What do you do when you email someone and ask if they want to talk with you about something that you sell and they don't get back to you? Do you make that lack of response mean something? Well, of course you do, right? Everyone does this. I do that. But remember my slide that humans are meaning makers, right? So what we can decide, what we have agency in our brain to decide, is we can decide what it means. Some people decide automatically that it means that another person is not interested in talking to them, whereas others assume a person just hasn't gotten back to them. Okay. I have emails in my box right now that need responses, and I have every intention of getting to them. But if someone is waiting on my response because they have offered something to me and they're soliciting something, my delay, which has everything to do with the fact that I'm giving this presentation today and nothing to do with the fact of whether I'm interested or not interested in their email, they can decide that my lack of response means something. And what I find is that everyone does this. Everyone gives meaning. The question is whether you can learn to give meaning in a way that furthers your cause and helps you believe the best, that helps you persevere. Okay. Now I have an example from the personal realm of how we bring definitions to people relationships also. So I showed you a picture of my husband, Ryan, earlier. We have been married in May. We'll have been married 26 years. So we got married when we were very, very young, as you can tell. No, I'm just kidding. But when we were married only 3 or 4 years, he was in graduate school in Austin, and we made friends with another couple that we met at church, and the husband in that couple was also in grad school. So the wives are working, putting their husbands through school, the husbands are in grad school, and nobody had kids. And since we had few responsibilities and no mortgage and hand-me-down cars, we were just living life large because we had discretionary income and no real responsibility. So it was a really sweet several-year season of getting to be good friends with this other couple, okay? So one night we're having dinner. We had dinner together at least once a week, sometimes twice a week. We'd get together, and we were having dinner together, and we were kidding with them and joking. Ryan and I were joking with them that we had been having one of our regular disagreements, which was about what time to go to sleep at night, okay? So at this dinner, we mentioned for our friends that we actually always disagreed about bedtime because I'm an early riser. I really do turn into a pumpkin around 10 o'clock, and I certainly want to be asleep no later than 10:30, but really before that, okay? And he's a night owl, and you guys, he's tried to change this for me because this fact of difference between us is not convenient to our life, but this is just how he is biologically, and it's really his preference. And so the first few years of marriage, we had a fair bit of tension about this issue. Now, if this is something that you guys struggle with in your relationships, you know that what happens is it means one person's bitter because they're dying to fall asleep. They fall asleep within 15 seconds of their head hitting the pedal, and the other person might lie there for an hour or two. And my husband was that one that would lie there an hour or two. He didn't go sleeping up. This is before iPads. I don't think we had more than one TV in our house at the time. Okay, so he would just lie there trying to fall asleep. I mean, it was really pretty miserable. So we're having having dinner with these friends one night, and when we confess we're going through this problem, they say, "Well, you're not trying to still go to bed at the same time, are you?" And we were like, "Well, yes, of course we are, aren't you?" And they said, "Oh, heavens, no." We realized almost immediately that this wasn't going to work, and we hardly ever fall asleep at the same time. Now, to understand why this was so earth-shattering for me, okay, you have to know just a little bit about my background. My parents did manage to stay married their entire adult lives until they died, but it was not a very happy marriage. And my mother worked as a nurse at night because the night shift paid better. So she and my dad really were on opposite schedules. They were rarely home, and a lot of times when they were at home, they were fighting. So when I got married at a pretty young age, I had all these dreams about what my marriage would look like. And I don't know where I got the idea, probably from television, but I had an idea in my mind that going to bed at the same time, parentheses, going to sleep at the same time, means that you have a happy marriage. Except the problem was that neither of us were happy because I was really tired and he was really frustrated, right? So these friends were people that we respected, and they had a seemingly happy marriage. So it occurred to me in that moment that maybe the meaning that I had been assigning to what it meant to go to bed at the same time didn't have to mean what I thought it did. What if I decided that encouraging my husband to stay up and work on his dissertation or watch a show he wanted to watch or do whatever he wanted, what if that meant we had a happy marriage? And what if encouraging him to urge me to get the sleep I needed so I could get up and work early, which I've always loved to do. It's always been my preferred method. What if that meant we had a happy marriage? You guys, this revelation, it really changed our lives. And it's a funny thing to tell now because it's been 20 years, but I think we probably would have thought about that forever if someone else hadn't stepped in and said, why are you making that mean that? Now, they didn't phrase it quite like that. It's in reflecting that I look back and I realized I was assigning meaning to something in a way that I didn't have to, right? So what does this mean about sales? I have had clients say to me this week, more than one, more than two, more than five. People have said to me that they think it is not appropriate to be selling right now. Now, I know that there are some of you on this call that have real logistic difficulties or impossibilities, at least temporarily, where you are dependent on something happening face-to-face, which at this moment cannot happen. So I want to express my deepest heartfelt condolences that I know there's a wide variety of people, and this is going to be an easier transition and pivot for some people than others. I totally acknowledge that, okay? But for a minute here, I'm talking to the people who absolutely can be selling, but who are wrestling with the idea of what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. And I don't think you're crazy. I think it's very important to be sensitive with where we are and how we approach people right now, both in maintaining existing customer relationships as well as potentially cultivating new ones. But I want to bring this point to your attention and say that when you decide not to be selling, or you're not able to think creatively about how to serve people differently during this time, you are making a big decision for someone else. And the decision that you're making is by not even bringing it to their attention. So just understand that you could be making our forced to work from home situation mean something that it doesn't have to mean. What if someone wanted to buy what you sell right now because it's right now? Now, some of you might be thinking, okay, that's it. She is certifiably crazy. Before you decide that, let me tell you what happened to me this week. On Monday night this week, I got a lead from one of my customers who is in one of my current 12-week classes. Periodically, I hold these 12-week cohorts. And sometimes they're for a whole company at a time, and sometimes they are various business owners that come together inside a group and they form a group, okay? This is one of my public groups that's like that. And so a woman that's in one of my classes sent me a text, and she said that one of her customers was interested in talking to me. She said that he had some sales training help that he was interested in for his team, and would I get in touch with her the next day? So this was Monday night this week. So Tuesday, I texted with my friend in the morning who had the referral. By Tuesday afternoon, this business owner who wanted to talk to me is able to make a phone call. Of course, I've got openness in my schedule because things have shifted around and appointments canceled and rescheduled and things like that. So we're able to get on the phone within 24 hours of her first giving me the lead, okay? We talk for about a half hour. He tells me his problem. I tell him a couple possible solutions I can see. He asked me to give him a price. I email him on Wednesday. On Wednesday afternoon, we talk, and he says, I talked to my team, can you deliver this tomorrow? Okay, you guys, I'm just confessing to you that I wasn't going to ask for it to happen that quick. I didn't want to make a decision for him, and I wanted to be sensitive. So the way I asked is I said, when would you like me to conduct this? I was hoping it would be sooner than later, but I was certainly not going to press him if that would be perceived as insensitive. But I did ask for the sale. I said, when would you like to do this? And I wrote down the words he said so I could read them to you because I really want to make sure I say this right. He literally said, can you do this workshop this week or next at the latest? Because I want to do this while everyone is stuck at home. Otherwise, it's too hard to get everyone all together in the same room. Isn't this amazing? It was because of this timing that he was ready for my service. And I'm so glad that I didn't decide he couldn't be interested by deciding for him and following up slower or not asking. I thought that was amazing. So today is Friday, and I delivered the 3-hour workshop yesterday afternoon. He has already paid. And so in the same week, I got the lead, talked to him, qualified it, sent a price, he signed it, paid for it, and it's delivered in 4 days. That's amazing, right? I mean, it was astonishing, but it's a real story. So I wanted you to have that as an example. Okay. Now, there's a last area that we're going to cover, and we're going to talk about the meaning that we make when we talk to ourselves about ourselves in our own head. Remember, I call this self-talk, okay? Now, one of my favorite books on selling, some of you are familiar with it, and some of you are not. It's called The Inner Game of Selling by Ron Willingham. God bless him. This man just died. He was well into his 80s, and he had a rich life being a sales trainer and helping people. And I think that the book that he left us is just this wonderful legacy that he gave the world. And he says in the book, I'm just going to read this slide for you, just word for word. He says in the book, your ability to sell is much more an issue of who you are than what you know. This changes the whole context of what it takes to be successful in selling. It's the sum of your inner values and beliefs that regulate the controls your sales success. And to the extent that these are strengthened and expanded, your sales success will automatically grow. But until then, it will probably remain the same. These provocative statements are the exact opposite of most of the sales training that I have received when I was an employee of other people. I went through 3 separate week-long sales training courses early in my career, and they were all emphasizing what to say, how to negotiate, and basically talked about what kind of tools to use. And we need tools for selling. I teach tools for selling. I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but what Ron Willingham is saying here, which I think is very interesting, it goes to this idea of self-talk, is that he's saying, what if our success is largely linked to what we believe is possible? I think that this issue of self-talk is tied to how we decide what situations mean, okay? Pay attention to what you tell yourself all day long. What kind of thoughts do you entertain? I strongly suggest that most of you would never say to another person the kind of self-condemning, negative talk that you allow yourself to think about what you can do and who you are. We need to be looking at how we are acting and speaking and ask why we do what we do. We have so many things, you all, that are just part of the habits of our life, including our self-talk. We wake up in the morning, we let out the dog, we make our coffee, we go into the habits of our behavior and our habits of thinking without stopping often to ask why. And sometimes we need someone else to ask why we're doing certain things that we're doing. So I want to do that for you today with some of the examples, I hope. So I've got one last example from my own family about how we tend to operate on autopilot without asking ourselves what we're really thinking, okay? When my boys were little, we lived in a couple different states, and my in-laws have always lived in Alabama. So if you're an Alabaman, when it comes summertime, you make, if you're at all able to do this, and many Alabamans of all different socioeconomic status levels do this, they migrate down to the Alabama and Florida Gulf Coast. That's what you do if you're an Alabaman. So every year when my boys were growing up, we made an annual trip of driving to the Alabama coast or the Florida coast to meet my husband's family at the beach, okay? Now, we had a minivan, and we would, depending on where we lived, sometimes it was a 10-hour drive, sometimes it was a 13-hour drive, but we would meet up with my in-laws and all the cousins, and my in-laws would graciously rent a big house every summer for a week. And we could see the cousins, and we could vacation, and we could do all of this rent-free if we could just get there. So this was the cheapest, most awesome vacation we could imagine when our boys were little, and we did it year after year after year, okay? Now, I loved this trip, but I dreaded the packing, because when it came time to pack, here's what would happen. My husband would go wash the car, and then he would get very, very serious. No smiles allowed. He would stand staring, in fact, sometimes scowling at the back of the van, inspecting the packing as we loaded it. And he would usually become irritable, and he would snap at the kids, and really the whole experience wasn't complete unless someone was crying by the end. And then obsess about leaving on time, at which time we finally left, and we're usually all mad at each other. Okay, this was to go on vacation. This was part of our ritual every year. So I kid you not, I was probably about 10 years into this recurring issue before I recognized it as a pattern. I realized there was a pattern. And yes, it really took me that long, to figure it out. And I asked what was going on. Now, the great thing about having this very self-aware psychologist husband is that we really can have conversations like this. So when he was no longer irritable, I could bring up the issue and I could say, what is going on? What is going on? It's taking me till now to realize there's this pattern. What is going on? And after a while of reflecting, Ryan was able to say, part of being a dad and going on trips means that you take your job very seriously. And I am making sure that we leave on time, that we pack right, and this is what it means to be a dad and go on vacation. Okay. Now, why did he think that packing for vacation meant that you had to be grumpy? Well, this is because this is how his parents pack. This is how they pack to go on vacation, to go to the beach. And this is what was modeled for him, right? The trip is not complete unless everyone's fighting by the time they actually leave. And I did have his permission to tell this story, just so you know. So as he was growing up, his parents, they did this over and over and over again. And for him, this is what he learned that trips mean, right? So you see how this example is actually an example of the world and worldview, right? Trips mean this. People to people, you got to pick a fight with someone, right? Or you're not doing what needs to be done. And probably the self-talk that was going on in his own head, right? This is what it means to pack. This is what it means for me to be responsible, right? It just was habit, right? It's just habit. So I did share that story with permission, but that is what he decided that responsibility means. So our last exercise that we're going to do here is that I want you to do a simple exercise of journaling. And I periodically will do things like this for myself to help me identify and immediately have those limiting beliefs about what I make selling mean come to mind. I want you to write out a few of your own ideas for about a minute. I'm going to give you a little bit longer than I did last time. Capture what comes to your head if you write down, I can't sell more because, fill in the blank on what those things are. And then after you've written that on your notebook or your computer, wherever you're taking notes, please put some answers in the chat if you feel comfortable sharing that. I'd really like to be able to come back to those. Write out the ideas that come to mind. And it may be that some of you, again, it may be that some of you really logistically have some unique challenges to selling. And I hope in the Q&A, if I can be a resource in some of those, I'd love to be. But I also want you to recognize if some of this is about an area of limiting beliefs. Okay, so I'll be quiet for a minute and let you guys fill that in. I'm going to give you a minute. Do about 15 more seconds. Okay, so you see how that could be a longer workshop exercise, which it is under normal circumstances. Go ahead while I'm talking, you guys keep filling out the chat. That would be super. Let's now look at our list, and after each answer that you wrote, I want you to take a minute and I want you to look down your list and I want you to say, am I 100% certain that this is true? Am I 100% certain this is true? Is there anyone else I can ask if this is true? Okay, think about that. Think about resources that may be available to you. Is there any other way to look at this besides the way I'm thinking? So let me ask those questions again. Am I 100% certain that this is true? Is there anyone else that I can ask if this is true? And is there another way to look at what I'm thinking? Probably the answer is there is at least an alternate way to look at what you're thinking. It doesn't mean it's the perfect solution, but what I want to invite you to do is to open yourself to the idea that someone that is not as close to your current situation might have ideas for you. And I think that that is where a group like Network in Action really comes into play, with the relationships that you build with other people and with your leader, your NIA leader. We really want to see you have this kind of community where you say, is there something I'm not seeing here? Will you help me? I can be a resource in that process. I would love to. I also just have lots of friends, and I would love to admit if I can't be of use, but I can think of someone else who might be able to. Perhaps you have limiting beliefs about your ability to innovate and offer something in a different way at this time in your business. It would be understandable if you did. This is an unusual time that we're in. Okay. So I'm going to take you through this last slide now that is also from the Ron Willingham Inner Game of Selling book. If you look at any of the answers on your screen and you think, I might see that there's a different way that I could be thinking about something in my current situation, he actually gives a formula that has worked for people for decades now, okay? And he talks about this process that you follow of creating new self-talk. Remember, we're under the idea of that individual meaning making, okay? So the idea is that you want to draw a line in a delineation and say, this is what I believed in the past, and I understand why that was true, but this is what I'm choosing to look forward to and believe in the future. And so he literally encourages you to fill in the blank and write out here, I accept the old belief that, fill in the blank, as being true in the past. And see how gracious and forgiving he is, because he says, I allow myself to have believed it to be true at that time. Right? So for me, this could be, this is if my mother, let's say if this is my mother with the candy bar story, my mom could say, I accept the belief that I thought that it was inappropriate for Catherine to go sell candy bars as being true in the past. And I allow myself to have believed that to be true at the time. But I now choose to separate this perception of the past from my realities to today. I see that there's another way to look at this, that actually someone might enjoy funding her band camp because their kids did band camp and they think that's really special, okay? So I now choose to let go of any need to hold on to this old limiting perception. Again, this is a tool for you when you recognize that you have an unhelpful pattern related to self-talk about something in your business that you see a way it could shift, okay? It is something that's worked for me. It is not perfect, and it's not perfect in every situation, but I think it is a useful tool to graciously accept yourself instead of going into a series of self-condemnation and saying, I allow myself to have believed that to be true at the time, but I now choose to separate this perception of the past from my realities of today. And we'll have some time coming up shortly to talk about some of those realities of today as well. Okay, so in conclusion, the way, I didn't mean to have how first on the slide, I'm sorry. The way we look at situations affects what happens next. The way we look at situations affects what happens next, because people are always meaning makers. Okay, we can't help it. It's who we are by design. And what we want to do is we want to be paying attention to the meaning that we're giving and interpreting in certain situations, and ask ourselves if there possibly could be an alternate way of looking at something. Okay, can you decide that selling right now is a way that you could show love and care for another person? I share my story of my sale this week because I want you to know that I was so delighted and slightly surprised when that happened. But when my client said, oh my gosh, we're all captive at home, this is a perfect time for me to get people together, let's just do this over Zoom, that just opened my mind to the idea that other people might feel that way too. And so I can sensitively and thoughtfully ask and let them decide what they want to do based on my asking. I have a couple ways that you can follow up with me, and after I walk you through these two things, I'm going to leave my contact information on the screen for a second if you want to reach me about anything else. But the two kind of calls to action, you always want to have a call to action at the end of any sales activity, and that is often, here's when I can talk, or I'll call you next week and follow up. In my case, there's a lot of people on this call, and I'm giving you a couple ways you can engage with me. One is, if you would like to receive my weekly sales tip email, every Friday I send out a 2 to 3 paragraph email. It's not long. Sometimes it has a video embedded in it. Sometimes it has an article embedded in it. Sometimes I have an offer of something I'm doing. But the way you get on that list is you go to my website, which is extraboldsales.com, or take a picture of this bit.ly link. This is the shortened link here that takes you also right to my site. And I have a PDF that's called the 3 phrases you're using that are killing your sales leads. And you guys, what that is it's my least favorite things that people say in selling. And I have, it's like a blog article where I talk about why I think these are phrases we should not use and why we should strike them from our vocabulary. So it's a helpful piece. When you download it, it puts you on a weekly email list, which of course you can unsubscribe to at any time if you start it and decide it's not for you, but I would love to have you do it. The second thing is, I referenced earlier in one of my examples that I do these 12-week classes, and the next cohort of 12 weeks classes is starting April 14th. And I call those my deep dive. And so this is the Eventbrite link that will take you to the April class. We meet 75 minutes once a week for 12 weeks. And there's all kinds of information on this link about the cost and what you learn, the deliverables, and what we cover. And I'm also happy to talk about that in more detail. So I'm going to stick around, and I can send this back to you if you don't get a chance to take a picture of this, but grab this with your phone if you'd like to have those pictures. And then I think we're going to have time for questions. And here is my contact information. This is my phone number, and this is my only phone. And the best way to get time with me is to actually book an appointment. If you call me and I don't know you're calling, I probably won't answer because I get a lot of phone calls all day long. But this is my number, and you can email me or text me, and I'll get back to you as soon as I'm able. So NIA friends, I think we're ready for questions. How would you like to facilitate that?
So thank you, Catherine. We have just typed in, if you hold the space bar down while you're talking, it'll almost work like a walkie-talkie. You'll be able to ask Catherine questions. I'm hearing a lot of applause here in Houston and all over the country, Catherine, for your presentation. I did have one question that didn't come up, and there was a part of the group that's not so PC that wanted to know how many of the people that went to Alabama that were cousins were married.
I think that's your question, Scott.
So if you have a question about Catherine, hold down the space bar and we'll try to accommodate you. Anything you have at all.
I'm going to try to get to the chat too.
Getting a lot of great calls. Thank this. Very good. Good job. So thank you for all of that.
Okay, so I'm seeing some of the answers people had given: money, pushy goals.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, if there are any questions, Teresa, you got a question? Go ahead.
I do have a question. Thank you. Catherine, it is my belief that as a nonprofit, this is not a time to reach out for more money. It's a time to affirm relationships and show people we value their past support. Do you agree?
I don't know. I don't know if I agree. I think it probably could be done depending on how it's framed, because it's also a time that I can just speak for myself in this example. I really am very grateful that I have a ridiculous amount of food that is stored up in my house, and no one in my household with symptoms, and everyone in my house likes each other right now. And I just have a lot of gratitude for how we're doing. And I feel like an invitation to assist other people who have circumstances that just are crushing. I think I would be receptive to that. So I think I would say, I think the answer depends.
Let me jump in if I can, Catherine, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
So Teresa runs a great organization in Houston called Bellenzio, where she helps women recover from pretty dire situations. I've been on a couple of calls in the last few days with boards that I sit on, Teresa, and I think the underlying current is sort of agrees with you. It's a great time to keep reaching out and talking about your mission and checking in on people and continue to build relationships. I don't think you have to wait too long, but that's sort of how I wanted to end this call. Was I think there's something going on here that's going to be a huge gift for everyone who ever has to sell. And that's this. Today, obviously, no one would have the illusion that they should jump into a sales call without leading with a great deal of empathy. You know, empathy. How's your family? How's your business? What's going on? Great discussions around, what's going on in your life. And guess what? To me, that's the perfect way that we should be starting every sales call, regardless of Corona. So the virus. So this is going to teach us, I think, that leading with empathy and leading with some questions where you really care, you're not just putting them out there, is going to make all of us better salespeople as we go forward.
That sounds good.
I guess I would add too that I don't know, how everyone would with their nonprofit would do the appeal. So I never want to make a blanket statement and act like I, am omniscient, because I'm not. But I would question I still think there could be kind of a base underlying position in your question there, which could be saying that it's just not appropriate to ask for donations. And if you take that lens and you turn it a little bit and you say, what if I really, really chose to believe that people want to help and that they're free to say no, but that lots of people want to help? Would that change how you felt about asking? I'm not saying you have to ask, but my personal experience is when I hesitate to ask, there's usually something that's underlying there about a basic belief, which is devaluing the help that I can bring at that time. So when you see yourself as a partner that makes a connection, that gives someone a way to help, that might shift and open up creativity for a way to do that. I'm not pressing you to do that. I'm just saying I think it's possible.
Great point.
Any other questions?
Any questions before we summarize this or sum this up? Awesome. Well, I want to thank each and every one of you for taking time out of your day. I want to put a big blessing on you. We're praying for all of you. We will get through this and we'll get through it better together. I think there's something I want to leave you with, and that's, you're in one of three places most likely. One, things you can control. 2, things you wish you can control but cannot, and 3, trying to decide whether you're in 1 or 2. So the bottom line is, I know this, and it's been stated many times, but there's a big family here at Network in Action. For those of you that are members, we're grateful for you and we're here for you. And we have lots of opportunities. For those of you that aren't members, we have a daily tip going out called a value added tip every day. If you'd like to get on that, just send us an email at info@networkinaction.com and we'll email you that information daily. We have a great speaker on Monday, Rob Eppolito, who owns Video Mojo. Rob's going to be talking about how to make video for Facebook and how to make video Facebook Live post and how amateur videos can help you during this time. So we're hoping you'll join us for that call. Have a great weekend. Stay healthy and love on your families. Thank you very much, Catherine. Great job. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.